I think Maverick has been recording our conversations. My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. The words hung in the air between me and Coriella, my oldest friend. We sat in the corner booth of Marino's Cafe, the same spot we'd claimed every Thursday for the past 8 years. Rain drummed against the window. Outside, the afternoon was turning gray. "What do you mean, recording?" I set the mug down slowly, carefully. Coriella's fingers twisted the napkin in her lap. "I got a text. From someone I don't know. They attached a clip. It was us. Last week? Our conversation about your sister?" The floor felt unsteady beneath me. My sister. That conversation had been private, painful. I'd told Coriella things I'd never told anyone else, about how Alina had stolen money from our mother's account, how the family was falling apart, how I was considering cutting contact entirely. That conversation was supposed to stay between us. "Show me," I said. Coriella pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. She played the audio. I heard my own voice, raw and broken, describing everything, every detail, every accusation, every doubt. The sound of my own pain, captured and weaponized, made my chest tighten. "Who sent this?" My voice came out steady, but my hands wouldn't stay still. "I don't know. The number's blocked, but there's a message attached." Coriella turned the phone toward me. The text was simple. "I have 47 more recordings. Tell Zoena to call me, or they all go public." I stared at those words. 47. The number hit me like a physical blow. 47 conversations. 47 moments of vulnerability. 47 pieces of my private life, all recorded without consent. All leverage. "It's Maverick," Coriella whispered. "It has to be. He was there that day, remember? He came by while we were talking." I did remember. Maverick Osborne, Coriella's ex-boyfriend. They'd dated for 3 years before she ended it. He hadn't taken the breakup well. For months afterward, he'd called constantly, shown up at her apartment, sent messages that ranged from desperate to angry. Eventually, the harassment had stopped. Or so we thought. "Why would he do this now?" I asked. "It's been almost a year since you two split." "Because he's angry. Because he never got over me. Because he's sick." Coriella's voice cracked. "And because he knows you have money." That was the part that made everything click into place. I wasn't just a target because I was her friend. I was a target because I had resources. My divorce settlement 3 years ago had left me comfortable. Not wealthy, but stable. Secure. The kind of secure that made me a mark for someone desperate enough to commit blackmail. The rain intensified outside. I watched it streak down the window, each drop racing the others downward. My mind was racing too, but in circles. What did he want? How much money? What would happen if I didn't pay? "We need to call the police," I said. "I already did." Coriella's voice was small. "They said it's complicated. They said they'd look into it, but without knowing who sent the message, without knowing what he plans to do with the recordings, they can't do much. They said it might be extortion, but they need evidence." "He just sent you evidence." "Of him having recordings, not of him threatening you specifically. The message was vague. They said they'd need more." I felt something shift inside me. A cold clarity. This was going to be more complicated than a simple call to the police. This was going to be a fight. This was going to require strategy. "I need to know everything," I said. Every conversation he was present for. Every time he could have recorded us. Everything. Over the next hour, Coriella walked me through it. Maverick had started coming around more frequently in the months before their breakup. He'd been at her apartment dozens of times. He'd been present for at least 4 conversations with me, maybe more. He'd always seemed quiet, passive. He'd sit in the background while we talked, scrolling his phone or watching television. We'd never suspected him of anything more than being a clingy boyfriend. But now, looking back, I realized how careful he'd been. How he'd always positioned himself near Coriella's bedroom, where her phone would be. How he'd never left the room during our conversations. How he'd seemed to linger whenever the topic turned personal. "He was collecting," I said. "Deliberately." "Yes." Coriella looked sick. "And I helped him do it. I never thought to ask him to leave. I never thought he was listening that carefully. This isn't your fault. Isn't it?" Her eyes were red. "I brought him into your life. I trusted him. And now he's using our friendship against both of us." I reached across the table and took her hand. Her skin was cold. "We're going to figure this out. We're going to stop him." But even as I said it, I didn't know if it was true. I didn't know what stopping him would look like. I didn't know if the police would actually help. I didn't know what he wanted or how far he was willing to go. What I did know was that my life had just become infinitely more complicated. The next morning, I woke up to a new message. Different number, same blocked caller. "You have 24 hours to contact me. After that, the first recording goes to your sister Alina, then to your ex-husband Ianan, then to your employer. Your choice how this plays out." I read it 3 times, each time feeling the walls of my life get smaller. He'd researched me. He knew about Alina. He knew about Ianan. He knew where I worked. He'd done his homework. I called my lawyer, Oriana Reed. She'd handled my divorce and she was sharp, practical. Someone who didn't panic easily. I needed that right now. "Don't contact him," she said immediately. "Don't respond to the messages. Don't acknowledge anything. If you respond, you're confirming that you received the threat, and that can complicate things legally." "But he said 24 hours. He's bluffing. Blackmailers always bluff. If he releases the recordings, he loses his leverage. His entire plan depends on you being afraid and compliant. The moment you stop being afraid, he has nothing." "I am afraid," I said. "I know, but he doesn't need to know that." Oriana's voice was calm, measured. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to file a police report. I'll help you with that. Second, we're going to document everything. Every message, every number, every threat. Third, we're going to talk to your employer about this, because if he's threatening to send recordings to them, they need to hear it from you first." The third option made my stomach turn. I worked as a human resources director for a mid-sized tech company. I'd built my reputation on professionalism, discretion, ethics. The idea of my boss finding out that I'd been recorded without consent, that I was being blackmailed, that my private conversations could potentially become public, it felt like the end of everything I'd worked for. "What if I just pay him?" I asked. "What if I give him money and he goes away?" "Then he'll come back. Blackmailers always come back. Once they know you'll pay, you become a permanent target. He'll keep asking for more, and there will never be an end to it." I knew she was right. But the thought of going through with her plan, of involving my employer, of making this official and documented and real, it terrified me more than the idea of paying. "Let me think about it," I said. "Don't think too long. Every hour you wait is an hour he's planning his next move." I hung up and sat in my kitchen, staring at nothing. The morning light was streaming through the windows, making everything look normal and peaceful and wrong. My coffee had gone cold. My breakfast sat untouched. My phone sat on the table like a bomb. 24 hours, he'd said, but I knew that was a lie. Even if I didn't contact him, even if I didn't pay, he would make good on his threats eventually. People like Maverick didn't need reasons. They just needed to prove they were serious. I made a decision. I was going to follow Oriana's advice. I was going to file a police report. I was going to talk to my employer. I was going to stop being afraid of what he might do and start preparing for what he would do. But first, I needed to know exactly what he had. I called Coriella and asked her to meet me at my house. When she arrived, we sat at my dining room table with our laptops open. We started making a list of every conversation we'd had when Maverick was present. Every date, every location, every topic we'd discussed. The list was long, too long. 23 conversations over the span of 8 months. 23 moments of vulnerability and honesty and friendship, all potentially captured and cataloged. I remember this one, Coriella said, pointing to a date in March. We were talking about your divorce. You were crying. You told me about the things Ianon said to you, the accusations he made. I did remember. I remembered sitting on her couch with a glass of wine, telling her about the moment my marriage had finally broken. About how Ianon had accused me of being cold, distant, unlovable. About how those words had burrowed into my brain and made a home there. And he was here? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. In the bedroom, or at least, he was supposed to be. Looking back, I think he might have left his phone recording. Can you remember anything else? Anything he said or did that seemed suspicious? Coriella closed her eyes. He asked me a lot of questions about you. Your job, your finances, your family. At the time, I thought he was just trying to get to know you better, to be part of my life. But now, I think he was gathering information. The picture was becoming clearer. This wasn't a spontaneous act of revenge by a jilted boyfriend. This was calculated, deliberate, planned. Maverick had been gathering information and recordings systematically, building a case against me, waiting for the right moment to strike. We need to figure out what he wants, I said. Money is the obvious answer, but how much? And what happens after he gets it? I don't know. Coriella looked exhausted. I'm sorry, Zoena. I'm so sorry. If I'd known... You couldn't have known, and this isn't your fault. He's the one who made the choice to do this. He's the one who's responsible. But even as I said it, I felt the weight of it settling on both of us. Because even though Maverick was responsible, we were the ones who would suffer the consequences. We were the ones whose private moments had been violated. We were the ones whose lives were about to be turned upside down. My phone buzzed. Another message. Same blocked number. Still waiting for you to contact me. Time's running out. I showed it to Coriella. Her face went pale. He's escalating, she said. Yes, which means he's getting impatient, which means he's going to do something soon, whether we contact him or not. I made a decision. I was going to call him. Not because I was going to pay him, but because I needed to hear his voice. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. I needed to know if he was truly dangerous or just desperate. I called the number from the message. It rang twice before he picked up. Zoena. His voice was calm, almost friendly. I was wondering when you'd call. What do you want, Maverick? I want what I'm owed. What does that mean? It means that Coriella destroyed my life. She left me. She humiliated me. She made me look like a fool. And you were there, encouraging her, telling her she was right to leave me, telling her I was a waste of her time. So this is about revenge. This is about justice. You took something from me. Now I'm taking something from you. You're taking nothing. You're just destroying things. There's a difference. There was a pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. I have 47 recordings, Zoena. 47 moments where you said things you don't want anyone to know. Things about your sister. Things about your ex-husband. Things about your job. Things about yourself that would change how people see you. And what? You want me to pay you to keep quiet? I want $50,000, and then I want you to convince Coriella to take me back. I almost laughed. The second demand was so absurd that it made the whole thing feel surreal. He wasn't just trying to extort money from me. He was trying to use me as a tool to manipulate Coriella. He was trying to weaponize our friendship. That's not going to happen, I said. Then the recordings go public. All of them. Starting with the ones about your sister. I think she'll be very interested to know what you've been saying about her. Do what you want. You're bluffing. No, I'm not, because I've already called the police. I've already documented everything. I've already told my employer. So go ahead, release the recordings, see what happens. It was a bluff. I hadn't done any of those things yet, but I needed him to believe I had. I needed him to think I wasn't afraid. You're making a mistake, he said. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. I hung up. For a moment, there was silence. Coriella stared at me with wide eyes. Did you just... Yes. I just called his bluff. What if he actually releases them? Then we deal with it, together. But my heart was pounding, because the truth was, I didn't know if he would release them or not. I didn't know if I'd just made the situation better or infinitely worse. I'd thrown down a gauntlet, and now I had to wait to see if he'd pick it up. He picked it up 3 hours later. The first recording appeared in an anonymous email to my sister Elena. It was a conversation from 6 months ago, where I'd told Coriella that I didn't think Elena had ever been truly happy, that I thought she was stealing from our mother because she was desperate to feel in control of something. The recording was clear. My voice was unmistakable. The words were exactly as I remembered saying them. Elena called me immediately. She was furious. She was hurt. She said things that I probably deserved to hear. She said I'd never understood her. She said I'd always judged her. She said I was a hypocrite for criticizing her when I had my own problems. The second recording went to my ex-husband Ianan. It was a conversation where I'd told Coriella that I thought Ianan had never actually loved me, that he'd only married me because he was afraid of being alone, that he'd spent our entire marriage resenting me for not being the person he'd imagined I should be. Iyanan didn't call me. Instead, he sent an email to my lawyer saying that the recording was defamatory and threatening legal action. The third recording went to my employer. That one was the worst. It was a conversation from 8 months ago where I'd told Coriella that I thought the company I worked for was corrupt, that I'd seen evidence of financial manipulation, that I'd been considering reporting it to the authorities but was afraid of losing my job, that I'd been looking at other positions but hadn't found anything yet. My boss, Sidian Reyes, called me into his office the next morning. "We need to talk about your loyalty," he said. He didn't sit down. He stood behind his desk like he was trying to intimidate me with his height. "I listened to that recording. I heard what you said about this company, about me. I didn't say anything about you personally. You said we were corrupt. You said we manipulated finances. You said you were thinking about reporting us to the authorities. That's not just criticism, Zoena. That's a threat." It was a private conversation. That was recorded and sent to me without your permission, which means someone wanted me to know what you really think of this place. Someone wanted me to know that you don't trust me, that you don't trust this company, that you're actively looking for ways to hurt us? That's not true, isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been disloyal. It looks like you've been planning to go behind our backs, and I can't have that in my HR director. He didn't fire me that day, but he made it clear that my time at the company was limited. He told me to think about whether I wanted to resign or wait to be terminated. He told me that, either way, I could expect a negative reference. I left his office in a daze. My career, which I'd spent 15 years building, had just evaporated. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because my private thoughts had been made public. I sat in my car in the parking lot and called Oriana. "This is illegal," she said immediately. "Recording someone without consent is illegal in this state. Distributing those recordings without your permission is illegal. Using them to extort money is definitely illegal. We have a case. But my job? We can sue your employer for wrongful termination based on the illegal recordings. We can pursue criminal charges against Maverick. We can get a restraining order. We can do all of this. And in the meantime, you're going to file a police report today. You're going to document everything, and you're going to let me handle the legal side of this." I filed the police report that afternoon. I told the police officer everything about Maverick, about the recordings, about the threats, about the emails, about my job. The officer, a woman named Eveina Goodwin, listened carefully and took notes. "This is serious," she said when I was done. "But I'm not going to lie to you. These cases are hard to prosecute. We need to prove that he recorded you without consent. We need to prove that he sent the recordings with the intent to extort money. We need to prove that he knew it was illegal. He did all of those things. I believe you, but we need evidence beyond your word and the recordings themselves. We need phone records. We need to trace the blocked numbers. We need to find his devices and see if he has the original files. That's going to take time." How much time? Weeks, maybe months. I felt something collapse inside me. I'd thought that filing a police report would make me feel better, more protected, more in control. Instead, it just made me feel more helpless. The system was going to move slowly. Maverick was going to keep escalating. And in the meantime, my life was falling apart. The next week was a nightmare. My sister Alina came to my house to confront me in person. She brought our mother, who was devastated by what she'd heard in the recording. I tried to explain that the recording was taken without my consent, that it wasn't a fair representation of my thoughts, that I'd been processing my feelings out loud with a friend, but the damage was done. My mother looked at me like I was a stranger. Alina looked at me like I was an enemy, and I realized that no amount of explanation was going to fix this. The words were out there now. They existed in a way that couldn't be undone. My ex-husband, Ayanon's lawyer, sent me a formal letter threatening defamation litigation. I forwarded it to Oriana, who sent back a response explaining that the statements in the recording were opinion, not fact, and therefore protected speech. But the threat was still there, hanging over my head like a sword. I resigned from my job before they could fire me. I told Sidian that I was moving on to pursue other opportunities. I didn't tell him that I was doing it because I couldn't stand to be in the same building as him, knowing that he'd listened to my private thoughts and used them against me. The job market was brutal. Every interviewer I met with seemed to know something was wrong. My references were destroyed. My reputation in my industry was damaged. I was overqualified and unemployable at the same time. And still, the recordings kept coming. Maverick sent one to Coriella's current boyfriend. It was a conversation where I'd told Coriella that I didn't think her boyfriend, Alam Yang, was good enough for her. That I thought he was using her. That I was worried about her. Alam ended the relationship the next day. Coriella was devastated. She called me crying, saying that she understood if I blamed myself, but that she didn't blame me. That she knew the recordings were being used as weapons. That she knew none of this was my fault. But it was hard to believe her when everything I touched seemed to break. Maverick sent recordings to my book club, to my yoga instructor, to the president of my neighborhood association, to people I hadn't even thought about in years. He was methodically destroying my reputation, one recording at a time, and there was nothing I could do to stop him. The police investigation was moving slowly. Officer Goodwin called me once a week with updates, but the updates were always the same. They were still trying to trace the phone numbers. They were still trying to locate Maverick's devices. They were still building the case. But building the case was taking time, and time was something I didn't have. I started to fall apart. I stopped leaving my house. I stopped answering calls from people I knew. I spent my days refreshing my email, waiting for the next recording to appear. I spent my nights lying awake, wondering what he would do next, what other parts of my life he would destroy. Coriella tried to help. She came over with groceries. She sat with me while I cried. She told me that this wasn't my fault, that Maverick was a sick person, that we would get through this. But I could see the strain it was putting on her. I could see how much it was costing her to be my friend, when being my friend meant being associated with someone who was being systematically destroyed. One night, about 2 weeks into the nightmare, I told her to leave. "I don't want you here anymore," I said. "I don't want you to be collateral damage in this. I don't want him to keep using you to hurt me. Zoena, please, just go." She left, and I was alone, completely, utterly alone. And that's when I realized that Maverick had won. He'd done exactly what he set out to do. He'd destroyed my life. He'd isolated me. He'd made me toxic to everyone around me, all without having to pay him a single dollar. The break came from an unexpected place. Officer Goodwin called me on a Tuesday morning and said she needed me to come down to the station. She wouldn't tell me why over the phone, but her voice sounded different. Hopeful, maybe. Or at least less defeated than it had been. When I got to the station, she was waiting for me in an interview room. She had a laptop open, and on the screen was a series of screenshots from what looked like a cloud storage account. "We found his backup files," she said. He was storing everything in a cloud account. The password was weak, and one of our tech guys was able to access it. We found all 47 recordings. We found the original files. We found the metadata showing when they were recorded and on what device. We found messages between him and someone named Ideo Cobb, who appears to be helping him with the technical side of this. I stared at the screen. All of it was there. All the evidence. All the proof. "We also found something else," Officer Goodwin continued. She clicked to a new folder. He recorded conversations with Ideo where he talked about his plan, where he talked about wanting to hurt you and Coriella, where he talked about the money he wanted to extort. It's all there. We have him. I felt something shift inside me. Not relief exactly, but something close to it. The helplessness that had been crushing me for the past 2 weeks suddenly had a counterweight. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we arrest him. We charge him with illegal recording, extortion, harassment, and cybercrime. His friend Ideo is being charged as an accessory. We're going to build a case, and we're going to prosecute them both." "How long will that take?" "Trial? Could be 6 months to a year. But they're not going to be out on the streets in the meantime. We have enough for bail to be set high." It wasn't the ending I'd imagined. There was no moment of triumph, no confrontation where I got to tell Maverick exactly what I thought of him. There was just the quiet machinery of the justice system grinding forward. But it was something. Maverick was arrested 2 days later. Ideo was arrested the same day. Both were charged with multiple felonies. Both were held without bail, pending trial. The news made the local papers. "Woman blackmailed by ex-boyfriend's friend," read one headline. "Illegal recording scheme nets 2 arrests," read another. My name was in those articles. My story was public. But this time, it was my story to tell. Not a distorted version captured without consent. Not a weapon being used against me. Just the truth of what had happened. The first thing I did was call Coriella. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm sorry for pushing you away. I'm sorry for blaming you. I'm sorry for making you feel like being my friend was a burden." "Stop," she said. "You don't need to apologize. You were in crisis. You were protecting me. I understood that. I want to make it right." "You already have. You're calling me now. That's enough." We met for coffee the next day, our first time together since I'd told her to leave. She looked tired, worn down by the whole ordeal. But she was smiling. "He's going to prison," she said. "Maverick. They're talking about 5 to 10 years. "Good. Is it?" She stirred her coffee slowly. "I mean, yes, he deserves it. But does it change anything? Does it undo what he did?" "No. But it stops him from doing it to anyone else." We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the world was moving on. People were going to work. People were living their lives. People were having private conversations with their friends, never imagining that those conversations might be recorded and weaponized against them. "I've been thinking about something," Coriella said. "About how we talk about privacy. About how we assume that the people around us are trustworthy. About how we let our guards down with people we care about. And I think we need to be more careful. Not paranoid, but careful. We need to think about who we let into our lives, who we trust with our secrets." That sounds exhausting. It is, but it's also necessary, because there are people like Maverick out there, people who are willing to violate trust, people who are willing to hurt others for their own gain. I thought about that, about how my life had changed, about how I would never be able to have a casual conversation without wondering if I was being recorded, about how I would never be able to trust as easily as I had before. "I don't want to live like that," I said. "Neither do I, but I think we have to, at least for a while, until we feel safe again." The trial took 8 months to prepare for. During that time, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I found a new job at a different company, in a different industry. The pay was lower, but the work was interesting, and my boss didn't know anything about my past. I could start fresh. I went to therapy to process what had happened. My therapist, a woman named Carielle Edwards, helped me understand that what Maverick had done was a violation. That my feelings of shame and embarrassment were normal, but that I hadn't done anything wrong. That the recordings were a crime, not a reflection of my character. I reached out to my family and tried to repair the damage. With my sister Alina, it was harder. She was still hurt by what I'd said about her, even though she understood that I'd been speaking in confidence, processing my feelings. But we started talking again. We started rebuilding. With my mother, it was easier. She listened when I explained that the recordings had been taken without consent. She listened when I told her about Maverick's plan. She hugged me and told me she was sorry that I'd had to go through this. With Ianon, it was complicated. He dropped the defamation lawsuit after his lawyer reviewed the case and realized that my statements were protected opinion. But we didn't have much contact after that. The anger and hurt from our marriage had been reopened by the recordings, and neither of us was ready to heal from that yet. Coriella and I became closer than we'd ever been. We started seeing a therapist together, specifically to process the trauma of having our friendship violated. We talked about trust and betrayal, and what it meant to be a real friend. We made a pact that we would always be honest with each other, and that we would never let outside forces come between us again. The trial finally started on a cold morning in November. I was called to testify. I sat in the witness box and told the story of what had happened. I described finding out about the recordings. I described the threats. I described the damage that had been done. I described the fear and isolation and shame. Maverick's lawyer tried to paint me as a bitter ex-friend, someone who was exaggerating the harm. But the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings existed. The threats existed. The metadata proved that Maverick had recorded the conversations without consent. Ideo's lawyer tried to claim that Ideo was just helping a friend, that he didn't know the full extent of what Maverick was planning. But the messages between them proved otherwise. Ideo had known exactly what was happening. Ideo had actively participated in the extortion scheme. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they came back, they found both Maverick and Ideo guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Maverick to 7 years in prison. Ideo got 5 years. Both were ordered to pay restitution to me and to Coriella. When the verdict was read, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. Tired and relieved and sad all at the same time. A year after the trial, I was in a better place. I'd been promoted at my job. I'd moved to a new apartment in a different part of the city. I'd started dating again, carefully, slowly, with people I met through friends I trusted. I'd rebuilt my relationship with my family. I'd learned to live with the knowledge that my private words had been made public, and I'd survived it. The recordings were still out there somewhere, probably. Some of them had been spread around before Maverick was arrested. Some of them might resurface at some point. But I'd made peace with that. I'd learned that I couldn't control what other people did with information about me. I could only control how I responded to it. Coriella and I still met for coffee every Thursday. We still sat in the corner booth at Marino's Cafe. But now we were more careful about what we said. Not because we didn't trust each other, but because we'd learned that trust could be violated by people we never expected to betray us. One Thursday, about 18 months after Maverick's arrest, Coriella asked me if I regretted the friendship. "With you?" I asked. "No, I mean, do you regret having told me all those things? Do you regret being vulnerable with me?" I thought about that. I thought about all the conversations we'd had, all the times I'd cried on her shoulder, all the times she'd listened to me process my feelings and my fears and my doubts. "No," I said. "I don't regret it. What happened wasn't your fault. What happened was Maverick's fault. And I'm not going to let him take away my ability to be vulnerable with people I care about. That would be letting him win." "I feel the same way," Coriella said. "But I also feel different now. Like I'm more aware of the risks. Like I'm more careful about who I let into my life." "That's not a bad thing." "No, but it's a loss too. A loss of innocence, I guess." We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the world was moving on. People were having conversations. People were trusting each other. People were being vulnerable with the people they cared about. And some of those people would be betrayed. Some of those conversations would be violated. That was the risk of being human, of being connected to other people. But it was a risk worth taking. "Do you know what I learned from all of this?" I asked Coriella. "What?" "I learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I learned that I could survive having my life torn apart and still come out the other side. I learned that there are people who will stand by you even when everything else is falling apart. And I learned that privacy is precious and it should be protected. That's a lot of lessons. It was a lot of pain. Yeah, it was. We ordered more coffee. We talked about work and family and the future. We laughed at jokes and shared stories. We were careful about what we said, but not so careful that we stopped being ourselves, and that was enough. Today, almost 3 years after Maverick's arrest, I'm in a completely different place. I've been promoted again at work. I'm now the Director of Human Resources for a company that values ethics and transparency. I've been in a committed relationship with a man named Teal Allen for the past year. He knows about what happened with Maverick. He knows about the recordings. He knows about the trauma. And he's never once made me feel like it was my fault. I've moved into a house with a garden. I've started writing again, something I'd stopped doing after the trauma. I've joined a support group for people who've experienced privacy violations. I've become an advocate for stronger laws protecting people from illegal recording and extortion. My relationship with my family has healed. Elena and I are close again. We talk on the phone every week. We've even gone on a vacation together. My mother is proud of how I've handled everything. She tells people about how strong I am, about how I didn't let one person's betrayal destroy me. Coriella is my maid of honor in my upcoming wedding. We've stayed close through everything. We still meet for coffee every Thursday, though now we also meet for dinner and movies and vacations. Our friendship has become deeper because we've survived something together. Maverick is still in prison. He'll be eligible for parole in a few years, but I've decided not to think about that. I've decided not to give him any more of my mental energy. He took enough from me already. Ideo is out of prison now. He served his full sentence and was released last year. I don't know what he's doing or where he is. I don't want to know. He's part of a chapter of my life that I've closed. The recordings are still out there. Some of them have probably been deleted. Some of them might still exist on the internet somewhere. But I've learned to live with that. I've learned to accept that some things are beyond my control. I've learned to focus on the things that are within my control, like how I treat people, like what I do with my life, like how I show up in the world. If you're listening to this and you're going through something similar, I want you to know that it gets better. It doesn't get easier immediately. It doesn't get easier quickly, but it does get better. You will survive this. You will rebuild. You will find a way forward. And if you're someone who's thinking about recording someone without their consent, thinking about using private conversations as leverage, thinking about blackmailing someone for money or power or control, don't. The consequences are real. The harm is real. And the justice system will catch up to you eventually. Trust is precious. Privacy is precious. And the people we love deserve both. That's what I learned from this nightmare. That's what I'm taking forward into the rest of my life. If you're struggling with betrayal, with violation, with the aftermath of someone breaking your trust, reach out to someone you can talk to. Tell your story. Get help. You don't have to go through this alone.